Only you could punch a federal agent, knock him out, and walk away without so much as a fine. Francisco laughed as he said this. I had just gotten done telling both him and Edith about my adventure the previous night. The meeting with Elvis, while short, was extremely informative. I had found out where they were keeping my brother. I found out the reason they were there. I even found out how much information the CIA currently had on my previous activities. If Elvis will declare war on me, I would not back down. All because he threatened me? Edith spoke. There was a tone of arousal in her voice. Yes, I replied. A threat against one is a threat against all. I looked at Francisco. How is Anais adapting to the house? She is relaxing, he replied. For the first time in a long time, she has very little worries. Again, thank you for taking her in. No need to thank me, I replied. And how is your Jessica project coming along? There is still a lot of work to do there, he replied. But she is a quick learner. She'll be ready in no time. Good, I replied. Edith, Amnesty Week is running out. How much is still missing? Not as much as we originally thought, she replied. Many of the houses have come forward with promises of repayment. There is still a lot missing, like I said. I think your stun at the picnic certainly made a lot of people nervous. Good, I replied. Is there anything else? Not with me, sir, Francisco replied. I do have to go check on the boys and get the newer recruit up to speed. Ma'am, he said as he made his way out of the room. I think he knows, Edith said as she jumped onto my lap as soon as the door was closed. Well, he is not dumb, I replied as I kissed her. For a long time this would have seemed completely unacceptable to me, but time and life had driven me to forego those past illusions of honor and morality. Besides, it's quite obvious when all you do is give me bedroom eyes. I do not, she whined. And what exactly are bedroom eyes? Anyway, I continued. Laura told me you were a little mean to her at the beginning of her call. Want to tell me why you did that? Because I thought she was just one of your bitches, she replied. But when she told me who she was, I made sure that I took care of whatever she needed. I never pictured you for the jealous type. I laughed. You are always so calm about everything. I like getting what you are giving me, she replied with complete honesty. I don't want to share it until I absolutely have to. I'll keep that in mind, I replied before interrupting her next thought with a kiss. Again, the passion of our kisses immediately made both of us forget any past troubles we might have had. For the time being, again we were just a man and woman doing what it was more than natural to do. What is going on? I asked Francisco. The previous night had been a repeat of the first night with Edith. Our coupling had absolutely no love behind it. It was just wild. Exactly what we both needed. But this morning, I looked at the man that was fast becoming one of my closest friends talking quietly to my newest sister. It's nothing, Anais replied, holding on to Francisco's hand for comfort. Sweetheart, I replied as I opened my arms. She immediately rushed to hug me. Please, don't ever lie to me again. Now, tell me what is going on. Do you remember the guys from the laundromat? Francisco drew a cigarette as he spoke. The ones from the night you got Anais? What about them? Apparently, Francisco began. They are members of a local gang that has been making a lot of noise around that area. Thugs mainly, but they are troublesome thugs. I'm sure there is a point to you telling me this story, I replied. What do we care about a bunch of thugs? They have been making trouble in my old workplace, Anais began. They made the owner of the place give them my phone number and they haven't stopped calling or sending me crude pictures. Are they threatening you? I looked at Anais. She had just learned to be at peace with her circumstances before these events. Yes, she replied. They told me that if they ever saw me again that all of them would take turns. Do you know where their headquarters is, Francisco? I interrupted. I knew exactly what she was going to say. There was no need for her to relive those threats. Yes, sir, he replied. Should I call the boys? No need, I replied. Just us three is all we'll need. Let's go, you're driving. Please, don't, Anais pleaded, fear in her voice. I don't want either of you to get hurt. We won't, I replied, grabbing her by the chin and kissing her forehead. But no one threatens my family. What do you know about them? I asked Francisco as we moved toward the vehicle. Tell me everything. They have about 50 members. Their leader's name is Casper. He did 2 stints for armed robbery and assault. Got released not too long ago as a matter of fact. One of the guys you took care of is his little brother. What do they move? I was hoping that they weren't aligned with any of the other families. I could not afford to start a war with them while cleaning up my own family. Besides, the CIA was steadily breathing down my neck, and I needed to be focused on that front for the time being. Nothing more than weed and meth, he replied. They really have no alliances to anyone. Like I said, boss, they are a small-time outfit. Well, I replied, they are about to get a serious dose of reality. The ride was quiet. Anais was shifting nervously in her seat as the drive continued. Calm yourself down, baby girl, I told her. It'll be over soon. I'm so sorry I brought you this trouble, Dee, she replied. I should have just left and gone elsewhere. No, I replied, pulling her to me. This is where you belong. We'll take care of this little mistake of theirs in no time. Just hang in there, okay? She fearfully nodded. Tears were swelling in her eyes. Francisco, I'll be doing all the talking. Don't do anything, okay? Sure, boss. I mean it. If we can avoid spilling bloodshed, I would rather deal with it like that. I continued as we pulled into a small house in the suburbs. For a second, I was disappointed, until I saw the line of vehicles that adorned the sides of this particular house. These people like to flaunt their small fortune. The loud music revealed that there was something of a celebration going on. Looks like everyone is here, Francisco said. What's the plan, boss? No sooner had he parked the vehicle that I had the door wide open and was already making my way into the house. Without much respect or manners, I kicked the door open. The scene before me was just as anyone would expect, the pungent smell of marijuana burning in the air. Moans from some random hooker being screwed by a number of individuals that I could only imagine. Beer bottles and garbage covered the ground as the living room was cleared of any furniture in order to create some type of makeshift dance area. My name is Demon, I shouted over the music. Staring directly into the stereo made some unseen hand turn the music off. Thank you, I replied to the unknown figure. Like I said, my name is Demon. Some of you may already know me. I had spotted one of the thugs that I had so easily destroyed in the laundromat. I am here to see your boss. Someone get Casper, the thug said, fear dripping from every syllable. This one had been the one whose hand was broken after he tried to shoot me. His entire wrist was placed in a cast. Isn't anyone going to offer me a drink? Immediately, a young man walked up to me and offered me a beer. I uncapped it and took a long drink from it. The coolness of the liquid was welcomed in this unordinary hot day. I moved my hand to grab the pack of cigarettes. Bodies unconsciously moved away from me in a panic. It's just a cigarette, I laughed. Secondhand smoke is not that dangerous. They thought you were going to open fire, the man said as he slowly walked down the stairs. He was tall, small afro covered his head, and a large amount of tattoos covered his arms. He walked with a limp. Even through his jeans, I could see the toonie braces that held his legs together as best as they could. Many years of smoking gave his voice a broken sound. We don't normally see your type around these parts, he continued. This certainly is a special occasion. You hang on to that thought, I replied. Are you the one they call Casper? Because the nickname does not make much sense. It's because I turned so many people into ghosts, he replied. I am sure that intimidates some, I replied between laughs. I'm sure they told you who I am, so we can cut to the chase. I reached back and Anais grabbed my hand. I pulled her to me just as the smile spread out in Casper's face. Would you look at that, he said as he licked his lips. You are bringing us a gift. How very kind of you. Two of his men moved toward Anais. If anyone touches her, it will be the last thing you ever touch. All eyes moved from me to Casper. Anyone, I reiterated. Hands moved towards weapons. The silence of the room became almost surgical in its seriousness. Casper looked at me with a mixture of confusion and something else that I could not identify. Are you the one that screwed up my brother? I sure am, I replied. Sad to say how easy it was to do so, even if I don't know quite well which one he was. Is he missing teeth? Does he have a broken hand? A swollen eye? Swollen eye, he replied. You did quite a number on him. He continued to make his way towards me. The crowd parted as if he was Moses and they were the Red Sea. Everyone there says you just used your hands. Nothing else? There was no need, I replied. They came at me first. I just ended it. Simple as that? It's not that simple, he began. You see, I have to save face here with my people. You walk into my house. You play this character, thinking you can't be hurt. You flaunt this sweet thing in front of us, then you expect to walk out of here as if nothing happened? No, I replied, throwing my cigarette into the carpet. I expect to walk out of here with a few more notches in my belt. I just came here to save you a whole lot of bloodshed, and of course to demand an apology for my dear sister. I carefully removed my blazer and handed it to Anais. Then I unbuttoned the shirt at the wrists before continuing. I am ready to get that apology any way that might be necessary. I began to roll my sleeves up, carefully folding it as I went along. So it is true, what they say about the demon, he replied. He is fearless. He began to remove his shirt. The rest of his upper body was covered in tattoos, as were his arms. This is going to be fun. He cracked his knuckles as he took a fighting stance in front of me. Well, I replied, finishing my beer and tossing the bottle into the floor. Guess it's the hard way. He immediately moved to close the distance between us, swinging his fists wildly. I easily dodged each strike. This was a much bigger man than I was. For the time being, all I would do is allow his stamina to run out before I would commit to any strike. I immediately noticed a pattern to his clumsy strikes. Each right jab that required the use of his right leg was becoming slower and slower. After the sixth of those jabs, I saw my opening. A quick hook to the temple surprised him. He took a step back in order to compose himself. My hands were still to the sides of my body. He was breathing hard by this point. The pace I was subjecting him to was not something he was used to, and something his size would not be able to hold up for long. Right jab followed by left straight punch. A sidestep around the jab saved me from both punches of his punches. However, another straight punch to his temple again pushed him backward. For a second, his eyes were closed, his hands to the side of his head as he shook the stars that were surely blinding him. By the time his eyes were opened, I was standing in front of him. A huge smile covered my face. Are you going to apologize now? The last part of the equation took place. I needed him angry and careless. My comment quickly achieved that. His second wind and wilder punches quickly marked the end of this fight. As he put all the weight of his body into his right leg, I immediately kicked the side of his knee inwards. As his body buckled, I delivered a devastating blow to his nose. As he fell on his back, I immediately kicked his left knee. The sound of his knee brace breaking was easily heard by everyone in the room. His screams of pain quickly followed. Now, I said, there, I continued as if I was speaking to a child. I drew my weapon out and pointed it directly at his face. Now we play this my way. Where is your brother? I pulled the charging handle of the .40 Smith & Wesson pistol. And why the hell is he not here, in front of me, right now? The crowd quickly parted. Ah, there you are, I said as I pointed the weapon at him and fired 3 shots. The sound of urine falling onto the floor followed soon after the smell of shit. I had fired around his head, missing him on purpose. He tried to speak. Sorry, he managed to blurt out before the tears took over. Please don't kill me, Mr. Demon, sir. We'll leave her alone, I promise. Your promise means shit to me, I replied, moving the weapon toward his brother as the latter continued to lay on the ground. We could have avoided this mess had you spoken to me like a man. Tell me, why shouldn't I end your existence, right here and right now? We'll work for you, the man pleaded. This was just some big misunderstanding. Now you're speaking like a businessman, I replied, returning my weapon to its holster. Be in my house this Friday. Bring all the shitty boys that have been bothering my sister with you. Wear something nice. You aren't going to be pimps and screwing thugs anymore. If so much as a wrong number dials my sister's phone, I will be back, and I will not be so reasonable. I took Anais' hand into mine and protectively put my arm around her. Enjoy your celebration, ladies and gentlemen. I look forward to a long and fruitful partnership. I hear you are still making moves, old friend, Elvis said as we pulled into the house. I had Francisco stop the vehicle while I stepped outside to join my friend turned CIA agent outside our property. Some would say you are increasing the criminal factor in your family. Some would say that? I asked. I stretched my hand and offered it to him. Some would be very disappointed if they knew what was going on. He shook my hand without breaking eye contact. Our training was as sharp as ever. Where is your partner? He's running some records on your new friends, he replied. Not the type of people you would bring around the kids, wouldn't you say so? Absolutely, I agreed. For a second, I thought he would never find out about Rebecca and Martha. I clearly had underestimated this man. But everyone deserves a second chance, or so I've been told. How can I help you today, agent? Like I said, just checking up on you, old friend. He moved his hand to grab a pack of cigarettes which he offered me. I hope your lady friend feels much better now that you have dealt with those predators. It's strange that you would invite them into your home after all that. He lit both his cigarette and mine. Everyone makes mistakes, I replied. Sometimes people just need to be pointed in the right direction. Where would you say the right direction is this time? I pointed down the street, away from the house. I believe it would be that way, agent. I smiled. Far, very far that way? It would seem like you were telling me to go away, he chuckled. Am I bothering you, D? Not at all, I laughed. You just look tired and bored. I hear that there is a very nice hotel down that way. They make a great omelet in the mornings. I'm more of a steak and eggs kind of man, he continued looking at me. Here I thought you were going to say that you became a vegan. I replied, tossing the cigarette into the ground. Honestly, it wouldn't have surprised me. What type of criminal mastermind just tosses that DNA-filled piece of evidence into the ground? Elvis asked as I began to walk toward the gate. The guard there had been paying close attention to the entire interaction that had taken place between Elvis and myself. I have no idea, I replied. I, however, would assume that since the government already has my DNA, and since I could care less about littering in front of a federal agent, well, that's all I got. You have yourself a good day, Agent Presley. I'll send out some nice lemonade out for you. As I walked past the gate guard, Elvis had already disappeared. Tell Francisco I need to see him in my office. Now. Yes, sir, he replied before picking up the radio and relaying the message. Francisco was already waiting for me in the office by the time I had gotten there. Edith was nowhere in sight. She is helping Anais calm down, he said when he noticed I was looking for Edith. Which means they are drinking mimosas and laughing at how hard you beat Casper. What's going on, boss? I need you to run through the phone lines, the cameras, everything in the house and see if anything is being bugged. Also, I need a private investigator, preferably one with no ties to the family for some very discreet work. How is my brother's setup for his bar exam going? He's all set, has been studying nonstop. His test will be scheduled once he feels that he is ready for it. I got a few techie friends. I can have them take a look at the lines and video feeds to see if anyone is hijacking our signal, and I got the right person for the other job. I'll get you his name and number. What's going on? Francisco was truly concerned for me. While I was careful not to show any changes in my exterior, this last conversation with Elvis had truly shaken me. The fact that he knew about Rebecca and Martha made me consider how I would approach him in the future. Just being cautious, I lied. What we are getting ready to do is going to be happening really quickly, and I will not have time to check up on certain things once the ball gets rolling. If everything works out as I hope it will, then we are going to pin every other family in this city against whoever it was that paid to have my brother set up. I took a seat in the desk and motioned him to join me. While I still think that someone inside the family is guilty, I think it was more a crime of arrogance than one of dishonor. But my CIA buddy is getting awfully close to my business, a lot faster than I expected him to, as a matter of fact. We are going to need to give him a distraction. What do you have in mind? Francisco's smile assured me that I had made a great choice when I started allowing him more and more into my inner circle. He, above anyone else in my immediate vicinity, was more privy to my mind's inner workings. It looks like I'll have a good job for the new guys, I replied. Nothing like a little chaos to get the ball rolling. We're going to be taking a little road trip to City Hall. I need to get some blueprints for several buildings around town. I'm not even going to ask what you're planning with that, Francisco said. Unless you need anything else, boss, I gotta take the newbie out shooting. Her weapon confidence is getting better. She should be done with her training shortly. Good, I replied. Keep up with that. If you need anything, let Edith know. Also, have her draw up some plans for the house. I want to redecorate it to be an effective business enterprise. Color schemes, lighting, all that. Okay, boss, he replied. I gotta warn you. Both of them are pretty lightweights when it comes to drinking, so you're going to be dealing with a lot of giggles throughout the rest of the day. Both Edith and Anais were standing outside of the office door as soon as Francisco opened it. A wave of giggles greeted him as he walked past them. What did I just tell you? He said as he walked away, almost as if his only escape was closing. A freed man grabbing for freedom that was fast disappearing. What did he just tell you? Edith asked. Both her and Anais' giggles drowned out anything Francisco could have answered. Are you here, talking about little old me? How much did you guys celebrate? I laughed as I looked at the empty pitcher in Edith's hands. It was a good reason to celebrate, Anais said with a mock frown painted on her face. Sorry that I was happy and wanted Edith to be happy too. You were a bad man in there. You know, Edith replied. I have known D.D. I've known you for years. I have never seen you fight, never ever seen you fight. I bet it would be hot. God, it was so hot, Anais continued. He was like a animal, just took him apart. Oh, I've seen him be an animal, Edith said. Seen him take things apart too. More like rip things apart. Both of the girls started laughing. Okay, ladies, I replied. Time to get you two to bed. Let's leave the big man to take care of his big man business. I think we can entertain ourselves. I'll see you tomorrow night. Gentlemen, I greeted the 5 guests that were standing in the office. I was expecting them, of course, but their new dress clearly surprised me. I gotta say, you all clean up rather well. If you don't mind, I have a busy schedule and there is a lot to cover here. Of course, whatever I say here will ultimately be up to your leader to decide if he will agree with or not. So, let's get started. I took a seat behind the large desk. Gentlemen, you have insulted me. Profoundly. My first instinct is to skin each and every one of you alive. Make sure that your name is forever erased from the history books. But my chief of security and, of course, my dear Anais have wisely talked me out of such drastic measures. However, I find myself wondering if their counsel is wise. I need to know that your word can be trusted, that you can and will behave yourselves as gentlemen, as direct representatives of this family. Mr. Casper, do you think that these men can and should be trusted? Yes, Casper replied. His voice was a little softer than last time I had spoken with him. They can be trusted. Should I believe you? I asked him, should I believe any of you? You threatened to assault my sister. I think your exact words to her were that each of you would take turns on her. I lit a cigarette as I spoke. So if I believe you are men of your word, then I should be very concerned that one day you might make true to those threats. They were speaking out of turn, Casper said. They did not know who she was. I understand, I replied. It's absolutely fair for them to threaten any random woman like that. Is that what you were saying? No, Casper replied. Panic was beginning to take hold of his voice. It's not acceptable. These kids are still young. They don't understand how the world operates. Then why, I replied, why are they allowed to represent you? Why would they be allowed to represent me? I leaned back on my chair before continuing. A threat on one of us is a threat on all of us. But you're right, boys will be boys, I suppose. A sigh of relief emerged from each of them. I have no room for boys in my organization. Demon, Casper replied. Sir, you have to understand that these boys have learned from their mistake. They will not ever make such foolish threats again. You have my word. My grandfather used to tell us that all a man has is his name and his word, I replied. So if you offer your word on their behalf, then I will accept. I pulled my weapon out of its holster, dropped the magazine, and pulled the charging handle back. As the bullet that had been resting in the chamber flew through the air, I grabbed it and held it in my hand. This is for you, Casper, I said as I offered the man the single bullet. If they break your word, this bullet will either go into them or into you. Do we understand each other? Yes, he replied as he took the bullet. We understand each other just fine. Good. Have your boys wait outside. We have some business to discuss. I have a small job for you. He signaled the men to step outside. As the door was opened, Francisco walked in and stood to my left. We are having a little trouble with a certain government organization. I am afraid that they will start looking into our dealings far closer than I am comfortable allowing them to look. What do you need us to do? Casper was eager to prove his loyalty. Pick some of your more disposable members, those that need a stay in a high-class rehab facility and that have very little knowledge of your organization, I began. I need them to make as much noise as possible as far away from us as can be done. I want them to beat up pimps. I want them to break into businesses that exploit the people. I want them to break known lines of merchandise. You want to start a war? Casper asked. Yes, I replied, but not against us. I want them to start a war between the other families, between the other groups. I want them to turn themselves in for government protection, and they will disappear for the rest of their lives. I want them to tell a specific story. Francisco here will handle all those details. I have a few names in mind, Casper replied. When do you want this to start? As soon as we finish this meeting, I replied, and you get all the details. Pick your lieutenants carefully. This game we are about to play is very dangerous. The information that will flow from this office from now on will be worth a lot of money to someone, but that money will not be worth as much as how much I can and will take from you. Those boys, none of them will be it. That is something non-negotiable. They can't be trusted. From now on, I will expect you to be here the same hours that Francisco here puts in. He will also give you those details. Do you have anything for me? We are going to lose a lot of money, he replied. How are we going to manage our own families? Francisco here will also handle those details, I replied. All I ask is that you give me your loyalty and trust. I'll take care of the rest. If there are any problems, you will not handle them yourself. You will come to me and let me make that decision. Once I feel you can be trusted, you will have complete autonomy of how you run your organization. But until then, you do nothing without my say-so, understood? We have an ongoing war with another gang in the streets, he replied. If we don't fight back, they will think we are a joke. Francisco? Small outfit. However, they outnumber Casper's forces 3-1. Francisco replied, their main source of income is trade and extortion. They pay protection to one of the other families, but according to our accountant, they tend to skim from the top. More and more each time, that information has already been sent to them via an anonymous source. Any other questions? I asked Casper, can I get the specific targets that you want us to hit and which ones to avoid? I would like to send the men out as soon as possible. I stood up and extended my hand. Of course, Casper. He shook it with some fear. If you remain loyal to me and my family, you have nothing to fear. But understand that there is no hell I would not go through to protect my loved ones. Prove your loyalty, and you will have the same favor from me. Send me about 20 of your men, the ones that are most trusted to you. Make sure your brother is one of them. Francisco here will train them to be more effective guards. If there is nothing else, I do have an appointment that I have to keep. Jesus, I heard Casper say as I walked out of my office. You get used to it, I heard Francisco reply. A smile covered my face. The drive to City Hall was uneventful. The small moments of peace allowed me to collect my thoughts. I was worried about Rebecca and Martha, but I knew that Elvis would not do anything to harm them in any way. With Casper's boys on the way to their specific targets, I knew that Elvis would have his hands full dealing with a large amount of fallout, and the sudden increase in violence towards a very specific gang would certainly alert him. Our main difference, at least while we served together, was our own abilities in dealing with multiple things at once. While multitasking came almost natural to me, Elvis always struggled with it. I hoped that he hadn't learned in his years in the CIA. D, the familiar voice greeted me warmly. I did not expect to see you here. How are you, Mrs. Sandoval? I replied, offering my hand to the woman. I had not seen her since her husband and I had that fateful chat on the first day I had arrived back to my hometown, and that disastrous evening. I am fine, she replied. I am sorry about my husband. I don't know what possibly could have possessed him to try such a thing, she said. There is nothing to apologize for, I replied. He did what he thought was right. So, how can I help you? I came to see what kind of woman you were planning to set me up with, I joked. You are terrible, she blushed. All the women here are old enough to be your mother. But seriously, what do you need, honey? I pulled a folded sheet of paper from my pocket. I was hoping that I could get the blueprints for these buildings, I replied. We are trying to make extensions to the family home. I want to copy some of the structures in these buildings, and the architect will need these to give me an estimate. I hope you are planning to knock down those walls, she replied. It makes that house look so scary. I think it makes it look like a castle, I replied, but I was thinking more remodeling the inside and maybe the backyard. We are going to start hosting a lot more family events there. We are going to need the space. How is your husband? He's not doing good, Dee, she replied. After you left, he has been drinking a lot. It's like he feels guilty for having turned on you. I think he understands the amount of trouble he brought on you without reason. You know, my husband might be an a-hole, but deep inside he's an honorable man. From what he's told me about you and your family, I think you are very much like him. Sometimes, a good man has to sacrifice his own principles for the greater good. I was raised to believe that a man's principles define him, I replied, that it's all he had when he has to answer to whatever higher power. Oh, honey, she replied in a motherly tone, a tone I had never heard in my life. Don't confuse your morals with your principles. Have you ever done something that went completely against what you believed was right, deep down inside? Yes, ma'am, I replied, the thoughts of Edith immediately flooding my brain. I have. But when you did those things, she replied, did you feel guilty? No, I again replied. Honestly, my relationship with Edith did not bother me in the slightest. Then you may have violated your principles, what you thought was right. She took my hand and continued. But because you don't feel guilty, you know your morals are still good. I don't know a lot about you, Dee, but I know you are a good man. At the end of the day, you will always do the right thing. Thank you for the advice, Mrs. Sandoval, I replied, and thank you for the blueprints. You have given me far more to think about that I needed. I truly appreciate it. The drive to my parents' house was brutal. There were new thoughts surging through my head, and a new idea was beginning to take form. As I pulled up to their house, my young nephew ran to the vehicle, already in mid-sentence before I could even listen. And the doggy then tore the door apart, and he started chasing the rabbit. I did not hear that entire first part of the story. I laughed as I picked him up. You're going to have to slow down, Jesse, and tell me the story again. Doc killed a rabbit, my father said. I hardly recognized the form that was bent over a small garden. After he took the door down on its hinges. Then after he was done with the rabbit, he started in with the door. Funniest damn thing I've seen in years. The sound of my father's laughter was like music to my ears. I couldn't help but join in the laughter. Hey, brother, Caesar said as he came out of the house. Pops, Laura says that your lunch is ready. Come on, boy, get Grandpa inside. Come on, Grandpa, young Jesse said as he grabbed my father's hand. You gotta go get your yums. Okay. My father continued laughing. Are you staying long, son? Not today, Pops, I replied. Just came to chat with Caesar. but I'll stop by Sunday. Bring those 2 girls of yours, he replied. Time they came to the house. Did you already eat? I did, Pops, Caesar replied. Gotta get back to the books as soon as we are done here. Glad to see things worked out, I told my brother as our father walked inside the house. It wasn't easy, he replied, but I think he came to the same conclusion you did. What Mother did has no bearing on our relationship. What can I do for you, bro? I need you to speed up your studies, I replied. Things are moving a lot faster than I originally thought. We are going to need you a lot sooner. Can't be helped. Can you give me 2 weeks? No longer than that, brother, I replied. And just how does my father know so much about my 2 girls? And better yet, who told him? Your friend Presley and Dad have coffee every morning, he replied. They spend an hour a day at least just trading stories, gardening tips, and just laughing. It seems like forever since Dad has laughed so much. Elvis is not questioning him, is he? My suspicions were immediately on a peak. While I trusted that my old friend would leave my father out of the situation, there was always that possibility that he had changed far more than I ever expected. No, he replied. I sat with him a few times. All they talk about is nothing really. Your friend is very careful not to ask questions about you. But when Dad asks him, he responds very truthfully. How much has he asked? Nothing too revealing, brother. It was Caesar's turn to laugh. Mainly funny stories during your training and your deployments. Nothing terrible. The worst they have talked about was how much of a smartass you were during training. Presley said that thanks to you, he was a strong and smart soldier. Gardening? Yeah, I guess your friend has quite a large garden back in his home. He got Dad to start growing some small plants here. Never would have seen Elvis as a gardener. I laughed. How is your wife doing in her schooling? She is loving it, he replied. So far she is at the top of her class. She is determined to make you proud for giving her the chance. Thank you, brother. I know you didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, I replied. We take care of each other, you know that. Besides, I truly meant what I told her. It is a beautiful dream. It deserves to be chased. Get back to studying, bro. You're not going to talk to Mom? I'm not ready for that just yet, I replied as I walked away. I got enough stress in my plate to deal with that. I'll see you Sunday. Let me know what I'll end up cooking. The following days were a mixture of chaos and excitement. Things were coming together in an unexpectedly fantastic way. Of course, dinner was set in my parents' house, and I would be cooking. That in itself was no surprise. The surprise came a few days before that evening in the form of a small child holding a toy gun aimed at me as I walked into the family home. Bang, bang, the child said as I held my hands to my chest. Oh, I said, you got me, man. You got me good. I stumbled onto the ground, playing my part as great as I could. It's okay. Mr. Wee was just playing around. You are going to be okay, he pleaded. Okay, I replied as I laughed. And who might you be, little man? My name is William. My mommy calls me Willie. He extended his hand. This young child reminded me so much of my nephew Jesse. Sorry, boss, Francisco said. Just doing a little babysitting for a friend. It won't happen again. Cisco. The little boy ran to his arms and hugged him. I got him good. You should have seen it. Yes, Cisco, I replied with a laugh. He did get me good. Don't worry about it. Just keep an eye on him. You guys join us this Sunday. Big dinner at my parents' house. I'm sure the little man here will have a great time with my nephew. Run it by his mom, you know, your friend. See if she wants to join us. Yeah, I'll ask. Before he could finish his sentence, another person interrupted our conversation. D. Jessica held a blanket in her hands. Her tailored uniform was perfectly well worn. It hugged her curves and made her look beautiful. All the years had been taken away from her figure. The weapon in her side made her look enticing. This was not the woman that I had seen with my cousin's Johnny buried in her a few weeks ago. This was a better woman. Jessica, I said, it has been a long time. I take it that this one is yours. I looked at Francisco. We'll see you 3 Sunday. Whenever you are done, meet me at the office and get Casper here as well. Listen, D, I'm sorry. It was my fault. I didn't have a babysitter and we had this training. Jessica was pleading. What are you talking about? Everything is good. You guys are joining us Sunday for a cookout. Willie is fine here. He is always welcomed here. Francisco just needs to make sure he is keeping an eye on him. We have business to discuss. I smiled at her. It really is nice to see you again. You look more and more like that girl from school. Bitch does not suit you. Okay, D, thank you. She grabbed her son's hand and looked back at Francisco. What are we going to be doing, boss? Francisco started walking beside me as he drew the cell phone from his pocket. When do you need Casper here? In 1 hour, and tell him to bring his boys. We need to get the ball rolling here. Soon, we are going to need to give Elvis some work to do and keep him busy. My brother should be done with his exam by next month, and we can begin to try to get Angel out of prison. Listen, D, about Jessica. Francisco began after he had made the phone call. We were sitting in the office, sharing a drink and a cigarette when he spoke. Look, if you think it's inappropriate for me to watch her kid, you know, a good friend told me something that has opened my eyes to a lot of things. She said that sometimes we have to sacrifice our principles to sustain our morals. How long have you and Jessica been a couple? I looked at my friend nearly choke on his drink. And why am I the last one to find out? What do you mean? Well, I replied, trying my hardest to contain my laughter. Edith hasn't been saying much about Jessica. You have been spending an awful lot of time training her, not to mention how her son calls you by a pet name. Considering Edith and Anais spend all their time together, Edith would have mentioned something about Jessica, but she has not. So it leads me to believe that they know. So, why was I the last one? You already had enough things going on, he replied with complete honesty. Plus, I didn't really know how you would react to the news. Well, so long as you are happy, my friend. I lifted my glass just as there was a knock on the door. Come in, Casper. Leave your boys outside for now. I brought them as you asked. What is the plan? Casper looked at Francisco and shook his hand. I do gotta say that things have been really quiet in the neighborhood lately. I saw in the news that they found a house full of corpses, Francisco replied. Seems like there was some gang violence in the area. A lot of arrests and drug busts. Now, I continued from where Francisco had left off. Now we do what I am best at, divide and conquer. Casper, I need your boys beaten up. Not too severely, of course, but enough so that they paint a convincing picture. With all the families on high alert due to the constant drug busts, there is going to be a lot of questions being asked as to who beat up a couple of thugs. More importantly, they will wonder if whoever beat them up did so for a reason. So one of them will be picked up by one family, the other by another, and the most important one will be the one that gets picked up by Elvis. He is the only one that will really matter. Why is he the most important one? Casper was curious. Even Francisco sat at the edge of his seat, waiting for the full picture of the plan that was unfolding. And you are only using 3. There are at least 7 large families in this area. What about them? We fry the little fishes first, I replied, taking a long drag from my cigarette. We send one to Los Peeps over on the west side. That one will tell them that he was jumped by the Castellanos over in the south side. The other one we are sending to the Castellanos. They have been itching for a reason to go to war with the Mayates. But that one will say that he was told to accuse Los Peeps, for now. The one that goes to Elvis will say all 3 of them were attacked by the Mayates, and that they were told to say they were attacked by different families. This will make Elvis look closer into the Mayates, which will make Los Peeps and the Castellanos have a sit down and look closer into the Mayates. We are going to be uniting 2 families to go to war against one. Jesus, D. Francisco replied. This is a confusing plan. A lot can go wrong in there. What makes you so sure that they will unite forces? Elvis will make sure of that, I replied. When the third informant tells him that the Mayates were behind the attacks, well, he will also get some information on some very lucrative business enterprises ran by both of those families. They lose a lot of money, and only one family comes out looking strong. The Mayates. Both Casper and Francisco replied in unison. Exactly, I replied. The Mayates will receive an anonymous tip that they should pull back their resources for a bit. A few CIA raids will come up empty in their territory. This, of course, will make it back to the Castellanos as a show of goodwill to the CIA by the Mayates. To everyone looking from the outside, it will look like the Mayates are making a power play by trying to get the Castellanos and Los Peeps to go to war with each other. To them, it will look the same, except that the Mayates are working with the CIA to help establish themselves as the strong family in this side of the city. What about your own family? Casper asked. Remember, I replied, we are busy rebuilding our forces, trying to get our leader out of prison, and cleaning house of traitors. The outside family that reaches out to us will certainly be the one that set this whole thing into motion. It will let me know who is responsible for my brother's incarceration and your brother's death, Francisco. Still, Francisco replied, this is a dangerous game you are playing, D. It's the art of war, my friend, I replied. You should read it sometime. If it all works out according to plan, by this time next month there will be a river of blood flowing in this city. There will be a lot of pain and misery. The money that Edith is finding will be used to help the innocent and rebuild my family's trust in the community. Any questions? What happens after? Casper asked. We'll see who is left standing, I replied. Don't get me wrong, this is going to be a brutal fight. There is no doubt about that, and this attention will bring a large number of badges and agencies with letters for names. We have to keep our business very tight. No crossing the line in anything from this point on. When do you want me to send the boys out? Casper stood from his seat, ready to get the plan into motion. This Friday, I replied. Once Elvis begins to look into the AITAs, we'll know it'll be time for the next phase of the plan. It is true what they say about the demon, Casper said. He is dangerous. They say a lot, don't they? I replied with a laugh. Go take care of your end of things, Casper. Francisco. Yeah, boss, he replied as Casper left the room. Were you able to get the house cleared? The guys found nothing, sir. What about the private investigator? He drew a card from his jacket pocket. Here's the one. What do you need this for, boss? Insurance, my friend. Just insurance. Make sure the boys learn the layout of these buildings, I said as I handed him the blueprints I had secured a few days before. Build rock drills so that each of them can navigate the entire building with their eyes closed. 2 groups, 1 for each building. Divide the sections as you see fit. They are to train for a raid. Whose houses are these? I'll let you know, I replied, just not tonight. You have enough going on to worry about these little things. I was using the same tone of voice he used when he had told me similar words not an hour before. That came back and bit me in the butt rather quick, didn't it? He laughed as he made his way out of the office. Yes, it did, Cisco. I laughed. Yes, it did. I saw in the news that you're doing a great job cleaning up the city, my friend, I said as soon as Elvis had stepped out of his vehicle. Busy. I can't help but feel like they are being handed over to us in a platter of sorts, Elvis replied. I came to check up on your dad's garden. Haven't had the chance to stop by for a few days? Well, I replied. It seems to be doing good. I don't know what type of tips you are giving him, but things look like they are growing. We are having a small family gathering tonight. You are welcome to stop by. Thanks, he replied. I have a few more stops to make. The local law enforcement is running out of room really fast. So many people are singing that they can't keep up with the deals the prosecutors are making. Do you have anything to do with it, D? Why would you think that, old friend? Just a thought, he replied. Like I said, it's like they are being handed to us on a platter. Anyway, enjoy your gathering. Tell your father I stopped by. Elvis, he turned before entering his vehicle. Thank you for keeping our streets clean. Did he just flip you off? Edith asked as Elvis drove away. I was being a smartass, I replied as I took her in my arms. How are things looking in there? Your mom is being quiet, which is really weird. Your nephew is playing with Willie and the dog out back. Anais is talking to your dad about which flowers to plant in different areas of the house. Francisco and Jessica are doing the lovey-dovey thing. Edith stroked my face as she said all this. I was getting lonely in there without you. There you go again with the bedroom eyes. I smirked. She playfully slapped me. You girls get some of the side dishes ready. Laura will show you where everything is. Have Francisco meet me out here. I love it when you get bossy, she replied as she kissed me. Do you need to speak with your brother and father as well? Just my father, I replied. I could use some fatherly wisdom with what is going to be happening next. What's going on, boss? Edith said you needed to see us? Francisco walked after my father. Both have gotten to know each other due to their frequent interactions and had become good friends. Elvis is cracking, I replied. We need to add more pressure in his end. Has Casper given you a report? Well, things are going as you hoped, Francisco replied. No one has reached out to us yet, but the families are turning on each other. Your friend has been rather systematic in his dealings with the families. I don't think Los Peeps have any amount of muscle left. I saw on the news that the AITAs were having their own share of problems as well. Perceived favoritism has made the FBI put increased pressure on them. My father laughed as he saw the kids chasing the dog around the backyard. I don't think they will be able to call themselves a family for much longer. The Castellanos have clammed up. A lot of their networks have been closed. The heads of their family have left the country. Warrants have been issued for their arrest, but I don't think they'll be coming back anytime soon. I was expecting a lot of bloodshed would come, I replied. I am glad that I was wrong in that aspect, but the fact that no one has reached out to us is concerning. If you can't pinpoint an outside source, my father continued, you're gonna have to go back to looking inside to find your rat, son. That's what I am afraid of, Pops, I replied. But for now, we still have to keep Elvis busy. There are still too many families fighting for control of this city. Don't forget who you are, son. My father placed his hand on my shoulder. You left for good reasons. Be careful that you don't get caught up in this whole mess while you try to clean up. Have an exit plan. If you are not going to keep that seat in that big house warm. How many is that? Agent Presley asked for what felt like the 100th time in that day alone. He was not sure how it happened, but something inside him knew that D had a lot to do with it. That was the reason he had been sent to this assignment after all. His long history with Dee was a great asset. Dee had taken over his family's business enterprises. Presley knew that they were heavily involved in weapons trafficking and other illicit activities. However, he could not prove anything. As far as his investigation was concerned, Dee and his family were completely out of the business that suddenly seemed to implode around him. 50 that have taken, please, Agent Davis responded. There's over 300 names in booking. All low-tier criminals. None really have any true connections to the leaders of the families in the city. I think we have pretty much dismantled 2 families. A third one has closed shops. None from Dee's family or their new associates? Presley already knew the answer. Dee had been careful not to allow any of his members to be caught up in the waves of arrests going on in the city. Even the large number of murders were easily pinned on the 2 families that were now all but gone completely. Nope, Davis replied. They're still quiet. Everything they are doing is staying inside their home. Nothing illegal there. How many other families are left? Major players? The Castellanos are barely hanging on, of course. The Acostas are still quite alive. They are making moves to take over the leftover business dealings that are being vacated by the fallen families. I'm sure they're the ones behind all this mess. The Russians, along with the Salvados over in the eastern side, have always been friendly with Dee's family up until the arrest of Angel. I'm sure that they will be reaching out soon. Davis closed the large book where they were keeping the names of the newly arrived bookings. All in all, things are looking good. No, Presley replied. Dee is planning something. I can feel it in my bones. For now, we just clean up whatever he is tossing out for us. I'm sure there is something here that we aren't seeing. I'm gonna stop by for a visit with his folks, see if there are any changes. Did you read the report on Casper's people? They too have been quiet as of late. They absorbed a few blocks from when that small outfit got taken out earlier in the month. But other than that, they have been towing the line. You think Dee has something to do with that? Without a doubt, Presley replied. There aren't a lot of reasons why he would reach out to such a different group of individuals if he did not have a plan for them. Well, if he was involved, it is impressive how quickly he managed to dismantle 3 of the families in the area. Without firing a single round, Davis mused. Shit, if that is what he is going to be concerning his time with, we might as well give him a wide berth and look the other way. Look the other way? Presley repeated. God damn it, Dee. What? Davis looked at him in confusion as Presley began to gather his jacket. That's what this is, Presley said. This is a way for him to make us look the other way. Shit, shit, shit. So if his plan is not to take over, then what the hell is it? Davis grabbed his own jacket as he followed Presley out the door. 3-card Monty, he said as they moved out of their temporary headquarters and jumped in the car. We need to see his brother. Are you ever going to speak to me? The fact that she had spoken to me was surprising, regardless of the anger that it invoked within me. Her pride was still hurt apparently, and she needed to have some type of control. I have nothing to say to you, I replied, more anger and bile seeping from my mouth as I said those words, and I sure as hell will not give you any room in my life to find some way to screw it up even more. How can you possibly hate me so much? She did not cry. This was more a question to satiate her curiosity rather than a plea. It's simple, I replied. I blame you for the first experiences that made me the man I have become. Jaded, untrusting, cold, distant, and broken. I looked at her. And you made my father that same way, lying to him for so many years in your own self-righteousness. She tried to speak, but I held my hand up. Don't bother. I have heard it all before. I have to thank you for one thing, though. You made me realize something important and gave me a valuable lesson that has kept me alive over these past years. What lesson? She asked, reeling back from what she knew would be a heart-shattering revelation. You showed me that people can't be trusted at their surface. I took a drag from my cigarette. You see, if I had maintained my mentality before finding out about your true colors, maybe I would never have given Jessica a chance at life. Now, I look at her as she smiles happily in the arms of a man that is fast becoming one of my closest friends. Her son, who would have grown up not having a family beyond his mother, is now surrounded by people that love him and care for him deeply. Hell, Mother, your lesson showed me that maybe my brother was not as full of shit as I would have thought in the past, and that maybe his refusal to reach out to me was a sincere form of accepting my decision to walk away from all this instead of a manipulative power move. I tried to explain it to your father, she replied. It was a one-time mistake. Are you surprised that he didn't believe you? I looked at her now with curiosity and confusion. She still was having difficulties accepting her responsibility in the actions that had led her to deceive my father into believing that his oldest child was his blood son. She had cheated. If my father knew the details behind her cheating, he did not share with me, and I did not pry. No, she turned to walk away. I just wish he would stop looking at me the way you do. You don't get to decide how others feel over your cheating, I replied. And that is what makes forgiving you so goddamn difficult. You believe your own shit so much that you actually think that you are the victim here, but the truth is that you were the one that broke this family apart. You are the one that almost broke a father and son's relationship with your little secrets. You are the one that drove me away with your games. You did this to yourself and to our family, Mother. Don't you dare try to minimize your actions. As she walked away, I felt a set of hands wrapping themselves around me, and a different smell filled my nostrils. Did you have to be so cruel to her? You have seen that side of me, my darling, I answered her. I have little tolerance for cheating and deceit, especially when those things lead up to my family being hurt. I turned to look into Anais' eyes, just as their gray tint lightened a bit. She is your mother, she replied. I just think that one day she will be gone, and you might regret all these things that you were saying to her, is all. Anais, I said, placing my hands on her chin and forcing her to look into my eyes. I love you, but traitors must be kept at a distance. We cannot have any shred of mercy on them. I'm just trying to protect you from yourself, she replied, a small whine to her voice. That's not your job, I said. It's my job to watch you, not the other way around. Now go back, join the party and enjoy yourself. I need a few minutes alone to think. She slowly nodded and walked inside the house. I think she loves you, boss, Francisco said as soon as she had walked inside the house. Why are you out here? You should be enjoying your time with Jessica. We are about to become extremely busy. It's my job to protect you, boss, he replied, a smirk on his face. That was just as fast, wasn't it? Yes, I replied, laughing at his comment. They bit me in the butt just as fast. Since you are out here, I need to speak with you. I need to ask you to do something for me, without question or hesitation. Anything, boss, he replied. If my suspicions are right, I began. In the next few weeks, I will need you to trust me wholeheartedly. There will be a time when your loyalty will be tested, but I need you to understand that the decisions that I will be making and the actions that I will take will demand a whole lot of trust from you. I'm offended that you would feel like you need to ask me that, boss, he replied, deeply insulted. I know who cheated the family, who caused your brother's death, and who set my cousin up to try to take over the business in the fall if anything went wrong with their plans. I looked at him as his jaw remained open. Surprise and shock were an understatement as I said this. Before you ask, no, I will not tell you. Not yet. That is why I needed the private investigator. I gave them a target, and if my suspicions are correct, I should have all the evidence I need before we move forward. How? When? I have been thinking about it for a while, I replied, but the final pieces of the puzzle fell into place not too long ago. I just need the confirmation, mainly because of the repercussions that will come from the identity of the individual. Are you ready to speak to us? Davis asked the man as he pretended to be asleep in his bunk inside the small cell. He was the only one in that tiny space. Books littered the ground beneath his bed, and the smell of old cigarettes filled the air. Isn't there some type of law about not screwing with prisoners while they try to sleep? The prisoner did not move a muscle as he replied. I could blast music at an obscene volume to keep you awake all night if I felt like it, Presley replied. All I would need to do is pull a chair and sit here with you to prevent torture charges. Unlike my partner here, I don't have time to play games. Do you know who I am? Should I? Well, Presley replied, I would hope that you understood that faith is universal, and that you would not be as stubborn as the mules in the Grand Canyon. I knew that both his name and Dee's codename were inspired through biblical origins. This was to let him know that I knew more about his life. Tell your buddy to leave, the man replied. Once he is gone, you and I can talk. Get you a cup of joe, Presley told Davis. We'll speak later. Davis left without a word. He understood how Presley worked his interrogations. He would find a way to identify with the prisoner and would exploit any advantage in order to get his answers. How is my father? He did not move from the bed as he asked. Good, Presley replied, digging a cigarette of his own. He is growing a garden. Your brother got him a dog, and your nephew loves to spend the days chasing after it. The worst of it is gone for the most part. He actually smiles more frequently now. I'm glad. Angel stirred and sat in his bed. Pops didn't deserve this. Not many people out there do, Presley replied. But your brothers are bringing him out of the worst part of it. Dee? His eyes narrowed. His worry at his brother was sobering. That's why I am here, Presley replied. He is doing great. 3 families are down. I can't prove it, but I am more than positive it was your brother's doing. He was always a brilliant tactician. Not a single drop of blood was spilled by your family. That last statement calmed his hidden fears. What do you want from me? I grew up in a sheltered life, Presley began. When I joined the military, it truly was the first time that I had been away from home. I was foolish. I was an easy target for scams. I remember I was in the park one day, after looking at the Alamo and that statue with the names of the people that gave their lives. Well, a man approached me. He bet me $1 in a card game that I had never seen. He had 3 cards, and all I had to do was find the Queen of Hearts. 3-card Monty. I had never seen or heard about the game, but I was lucky, or so I thought. The first games, I easily found the card, then I started betting double or nothing, over and over again. Next thing I knew, I was the one asking for double or nothing. After being about $1,000 into debt, Presley looked at the man. Before I pointed at a card, a voice behind me just said, "Right sleeve." I turned and looked at the sleeve. Sure enough, there it was. Your brother laughed at me for days, but never again did I ever go out without him. He explained to me that what made the game so challenging was the distraction. The dealer made you look in one direction while he made changes in another. What did my brother do? I need to hear the details of the raid that brought you here, Presley replied, because I am pretty sure that he has figured out who is responsible, and even as we speak, he is making plans to make them pay. Shit, Angel replied. Then I need you to do something for me first. Sure. You agree without even knowing what I am about to ask you to do? His look reminded me a lot of D. It was clearly a family gesture, well rehearsed over years of observation. You are my brother's brother, Presley replied. Like him, you would not ask me to put my career in jeopardy or my life in danger without cause. It was his turn to look confused, but there was also a look of pride deep in his eyes. Whenever I ask you to, he began, you will need to find someone for me. This will make you go out of town, because this person is a very powerful witness to a lot of information that your agency will be very interested in knowing. Looking for this person will certainly take you out of town, away from any electronic means for people to reach you. Why would I do that? Because you are my brother's brother, he replied. And when someone bleeds on our behalf, we are honor-bound to take care of them. You have a good night, agent. I have my hour on the exercise yard at 10. Did you get anything from him? Davis asked as he handed Presley a cup of coffee. Or did he do his "you want something from me that I am not going to give to you" act? I'm meeting him tomorrow at 10, Presley replied. He confirmed my theory of D's activities with the 3-card Monty scheme, and hopefully I will learn all the details about it tomorrow morning. Why don't we just haul him in here and make it a family reunion? Davis was annoyed. How much of D's file did you read? Presley replied. There's still about $2 million missing, Edith said as she handed him the papers. Every dollar that was declared is accounted for. Even my stupid husband's schemes are included, even the ones that he tried to hide. But I can't find those $2 million. Did you check the weapon purchases? I replied, glancing across the well-prepared spreadsheets. Why? She stopped for a second, recognizing her error, but the weapons were never actually bought. But the security funds would have been exchanged, Francisco said, a guarantee of purchase. Depending on how many weapons, that amount would be substantial, and more importantly in cash. But my brother would not have been stupid enough to not leave a trace, I replied. He would have left a trace of money going somewhere, maybe a club purchase or a boat. Well, Edith replied, there is this purchase for a boat that your uncle authorized. She flipped into one of the pages, resting on my shoulders. My breath almost escaped me. Francisco just laughed at my discomfort. Is there anything else made out to this company? I tried to clear my throat loud enough to try to signal to Edith that she was affecting me in a very profound way. If she noticed, she did not care enough to move. No, she replied, flipping through the pages. This is it. Retainer, Francisco replied. Is the amount $20,000? How did you know? I looked at him closely. He never failed to surprise me. Usual charge for a retainer is 1%, he replied, a slight smug tone in his voice. You said you were missing $2 million. I'd look for small cash withdrawals of less than 10 grand since that day and the day of the arrest. That would prevent any alerts from being raised. Screw me, Edith said. I limited the cash withdrawals in the search to anything under $500. I want every single dollar accounted for, I said. If possible, every damn penny. Go find it. You're on my shit list, bitch, she told Francisco as she punched him in the arm, her temper flaring as she walked away. Shit, he muttered as we both heard her slam the door on her way out. Should I be on the lookout for a knife to come out of the dark? Yes, I replied, laughing at his clear discomfort. How are Casper and the boys doing? Good, he replied. They are almost respectable members of society. They have cleaned up their areas, took over a lot of territory once their competition disappeared. Then, with their community work, they have been making solid connections with their communities. Casper has been wondering when you were going to bring him in for another talk. He still has that bullet, you know? Yeah, I was amused by that. I had threatened him on our first encounter, more like a promise if he or any of his people screwed up. Should I be worried? No, he replied. He makes it a point to carry a 9mm, to make sure that everyone knows that the 40mm he has on his neck could never be used by him. I saw one of their initiations. He and his close men all dress up. One of the young thugs in the neighborhood wanted in, and Casper looked him up and down. He took the bullet from his shirt and showed it to the young man. This bullet has my name on it. A great man promised to put it through my head if any of my boys screw up. You have to be willing to put your name on that list as well if you are going to join us. The rest of his men each pulled a bullet from their own shirts. Each of them had a 9mm bullet. I think you made quite an impression on him, boss. I saw the young man a few weeks later. I almost didn't recognize him with his new clothes and his new vocabulary. He was walking around with a clipboard, organizing and planning neighborhood events. He is basically Casper's Edith. Francisco laughed as he finished his speech. I couldn't help but join him in his laughter. What's so funny? Edith walked in. The sheets in her hands had grown exponentially. Nothing, sweet. I stopped myself mid-sentence. Edith blushed. Francisco laughed even louder. Don't stop on my account, Francisco said. God knows you two are terrible secret keepers. If whatever the hell you two have going on is supposed to be a secret, you're still on my shit list, Edith said as she handed me the papers. Have fun reading this shit. I am going to have drinks with Anais. Edith, I said, please keep whatever we discuss in this office to yourself. Okay, she replied, I will. She leaned down and kissed me softly. Something I should know? She whispered this in my ear. I shook my head slowly. Her smile reappeared as she pulled away from me. Anything I should know, boss? Francisco said as the door closed behind Edith. I got the report from the investigators, I replied. My suspicions were correct. I have everything I need. Just have to find the money to get everything started. Has my brother finished his exams? Just waiting on the results, he replied. But he seems confident on what will come back. Good, I replied. My brother has been away from his family long enough. Now, we go after the backers. This person could not have done all this by themselves. There is someone in the shadows pulling the strings. Why do I have a feeling of dread as you said that? Because, I looked at him. Pretty soon we will be going to war. I had just gotten there, Angel said as he walked. Presley was walking beside him. The weapons hadn't changed hands. Shit, I smelled a setup from the beginning, but I thought it was one of the families, not from you guys. But even then, when the whole arrest came though, there is no way you guys respond so fast, and with such force if you guys were just listening. Do you know who the other shooters were? No, he replied. They were from out of town for sure. There was nothing in their clothing or their vehicles that showed any allegiance to any family. There was no power moves by any of the families either. Nothing to show who it could have been that ordered the hit. So D is here too? To put our affairs in order, he interrupted. I found out he was back in town when he visited. Who do you think called him then? There is only one person that comes to mind that would have such blatant disrespect that she would believe herself to be above any rules or commands. Angel looked at Presley. You should ask my mother why she felt that D needed to come back. He was making a life for himself, away from all of this. She brought him back for a reason. Only she would know that reason, Agent. Is there anything you would like for me to tell your brother or anyone else in your family? Presley said this over his shoulder as he started to walk away. He knew that this was a slippery slope, something that the higher-ups would heavily frown upon. No need, he replied with a smile. Knowing my brothers, they are probably working on something to get me out of here. Thanks for the offer, though, Agent. You're not too bad, he said, for a federal. He smirked as he continued his walk. Presley couldn't help but smile at the similarities between the two brothers. He hoped that D could really help him escape the setup, but he could not turn his back on his position as a federal agent. The drive to D's parents' house was hard on him. He had promised his dear friend that he would not involve his parents in their ongoing dispute, but if his brother was right, then he would need to speak with their mother. As he pulled up to the familiar home, Presley found a familiar sight, something that he had grown accustomed to over the past few weeks. For a while now, he and Dee's father had become fast friends, often enjoying a cup of coffee in the mornings as they spoke of everything and nothing in particular. There was something about that man that made Presley feel at ease. He could see a lot of his mannerisms had rubbed off on Dee. Agent Presley, the man greeted him as he walked up to the gate. It has been a while since you stopped by to visit. I was beginning to wonder if you had moved on from teaching an old man gardening tricks. Of course not, Presley replied. Things have been busy down in the lineups. We have been filled to the gills with criminals signing confessions, making pleas for clemency, hell, even giving up their fellow criminals. I think I read about that in the newspapers, the old man replied with a laugh. You guys are certainly cleaning up the streets. We both know that I have very little to do with that, Presley laughed as he replied. It seems like your son has quite a reputation that precedes him. No, the tone on the man's voice had suddenly gone from cheerful to one of complete seriousness. That is where you are mistaken, Agent Presley. My son's reputation has been earned, but it is not the reputation that you think. I am sure you have seen the hard corners of his personality, the brutality that he can inflict on his enemies. But you have also seen that deep love he has for those among his family. I know both of you were forced to do terrible things, Agent Presley. I can see it in my son's eyes every single time I speak with him. I have not known you for very long, but you two carry that same look with you. Neither one of you does a good job at hiding that deep pain that you both feel, but you do a magnificent job at trying to hide it in such different ways. You are more alike than he is with his brothers, the same personality, the same loyalty, even the same temperament. But while he aspires loyalty in those around him, you are more the quiet professional. Agent Presley, do you have any children? No, sir, Presley replied, still stunned by the man's sudden candid answers. I watched my son grow up far too quickly, the man replied. I heard his screams in the middle of the night as he fought terrible nightmares when he was a child. I stood there, in the doorway just outside his room, frozen in place, unable to make myself do anything that could comfort my son. But it was not nearly as heartbreaking as hearing his screams in the middle of the night as an adult, as I stood in that same doorway, listening to the screams of my child drown the night. Agent Presley, there is no worse feeling that a man can experience than the inability to protect his children. But that is where my son is best at. That is where he aspires such loyalty from everyone. When he is around, people feel protected by him, comforted, and they can smile freely. But even then, my son is still in some of his deepest sorrows, as you are. Both of you plunge yourselves into your own jobs so fiercely that everything outside of that just ceases to exist for the time being. You both grow afraid of not having enough in your hands and in your mind to drown out all the screams. Agent Presley, I truly wish I could tell you both that eventually those screams will fade out, that a day will come when you will stop hearing them. But that would be a lie. All you can do is try to find peace with yourself and find your lot in life. I spoke to Angel, Presley continued. He was not aware that Dee had returned. No, the old man replied. That was his mother's doing. She reached out to Dee and brought him back. As he stared into Presley's eyes, he continued. He had walked away from this life, had effectively turned his back on the family, but she brought him back here, and for that I will never forgive her. I was brought here to stop him if necessary, Presley replied. If he crosses the line, I will be there to stop him with everything I have at my disposal. I take it you had a good night, ladies? I asked as Edith and Anais stumbled into the room. Both carried an empty pitcher in their hands. Edith tried to reply, awesome, times? We sat in her room and tried to see who could finish their pitcher the fastest, Anais added. I think she won, or lost? They both giggled. Well, I am glad you two enjoyed yourselves so thoroughly, I replied, trying to snub a chuckle. As I looked at the two women, my heart felt heavy for the first time in a long time. I am afraid I will be extremely busy in the next coming days. Things are moving a lot faster than I expected. Far too many things have fallen into place, and I still have Elvis's attention on me. That alone is enough to make me second-guess my next course of action. Well, Anais said, I am sure that Francisco will be there to help you out as much as he can. She moved close to me, her breath boiling my skin with every exhale. She reached to the side of my face, her skin soft and inviting. Carefully, she guided her own face toward my own, our lips following a path to collision. As they met for the first time, the softness of her lips completely overwhelmed me and wrapped me in a cocoon of silk undertones. We can't, I pried myself from Anais, my body demanding an explanation that I could not provide at that time. It's not right, I continued. Edith said that she did not care, Anais whined, and considering her current condition, I don't think she would protest much. Besides, I am a grown woman, and I think I am entitled to decide what is right and wrong when it involves me. She again reached for my head. This time my arms interrupted her travel. Perhaps later, I replied, trying to convince myself that I did not want to succumb to her lust. Every cell within my body reproached me. Every fiber of my being demanded that I take this woman. Am I interrupting? I had never been more grateful to hear Francisco's voice. He stood in the doorway watching the scene. He glanced down to the sofa in the office and saw Edith passed out. Then his eyes fixed on Anais, disappointment clearly defined behind that stare that threatened to penetrate even the thickest body armor. No, I gathered myself as I answered. Anais, please help Edith to her room, and both of you get some rest. We all have had a very long day. I tried to regain the control that I had lost so swiftly. Casper is on his way, Francisco said, hoping that the revelation would help Anais move faster as she picked up Edith and left the room. His words had the desired effect. Also, your brother has some news that he will need to share with you, he continued. I am guessing he has received his test results. Good, I replied. Also get cousin Armando on the phone. Make sure he gets here to hear my brother's announcement. We are going to be moving pretty quick from this moment on. I looked at Francisco. And thank you for coming in when you did. I almost lost myself there. Not that I mind, boss, he replied, looking at me with concern. But I have never seen you lose control as you did with her. Is there something I should know? There is nothing going on there, I replied. That was the first and last time that Anais and I will be alone in the same room together. Please make sure of that, I added. As Francisco moved to gather drinks for both of us, I produced a pack of cigarettes from my desk. I think it's time that you learn a little more about what will be happening in the next days, my friend. Sure thing, Francisco said. His concern was obvious. What's got you so rattled up? I had hoped that Elvis would be far more occupied with other matters, I replied. The sad fact is that apparently our earlier plan proved to be far too effective. He is not as distracted as I hoped he would be. So I am going to have to take a huge gamble on our plan. I looked at Francisco in a way I had never done before. Complete uncertainty veiled my eyes. This is not like you, D, Francisco said. You're usually far more collected. You'll understand soon, I replied, as soon as my brother and cousin arrive. We sat and made idle chat as we waited. Francisco filled me in with his relationship with Jessica and her son. I was truly content with my friend's recently found happiness, even as the minutes dragged on and moved like hours. Your guests have arrived, Francisco said. Casper is bringing both your brother and Armando in. Let's get started, I replied, swallowing the last of the drink in my glass. Boss, Casper greeted me as he walked into the office. Things are moving outstandingly on my side of things. I got my results, Caesar said. I am officially a licensed attorney. Good, I replied to both. Cousin, your information proved to be valuable and extremely accurate. I continue to be thankful to you for it. I shook his hand before gesturing everyone to sit. Now, let's begin with the latest events. Starting today, we are at war with the other families. Francisco here will continue to be my chief of security, but as of now, he will gain the title of Capo Bastone. I looked at the men in my office. None protested. My brother will become consigliere and will of course serve as our closest advisor and legal representative. His first task will be to find a way to get Angel out of prison and back to the helm of the family where he belongs. He will have very little dealings with the actual inner workings of the family, and so he will work closely with our accountant. Again, there were no objections to my decision. Casper, I looked at the man that had quickly proven his loyalty through sheer hard work and determination. You have earned yourself the title of Capo Regime. I looked at my cousin, as well as you, Armando. Both of you have displayed loyalty and understanding beyond all doubt, and I know that both of you can be called upon at a moment's notice and will keep the family's interests before personal gain. You each will maintain your titles until we are no longer in war. Thank you for your trust and confidence, Demon, Armando said, reaching for my hand. This is far more than I desired, but I will gladly follow your guidance. You honor me, Casper said. I was just a thug when you met me, and have helped me learn far more than I ever hoped to learn about the world. My guns are behind you. Brother, Caesar said, thank you for the opportunity to serve the family. I will do you proud. Francisco looked at me. As our eyes met, we both knew that no words were necessary. Each of you have earned your titles. I am proud to have you each stand beside me at this time. However, the main reason for this meeting, I am afraid, is far more pessimistic. The CIA and FBI are still sniffing around, and we have run out of time to keep them busy so they cannot pay attention to our upcoming movements. That, I am afraid, cannot be helped. I reached into my jacket and produced an envelope. Consigliere, here is your task. This envelope is to remain sealed until the time that I am unable to perform the duties as head of the family. If it is opened before then, without my authorization, I will consider it as an act of cheating and will respond accordingly. I looked at the men. Caesar grabbed the envelope and placed it in his own jacket. In a few hours, I will meet with Elvis. I looked at the men before continuing, and my intentions will be made perfectly clear to him. He will either back me up or I will join my brother behind bars. While I still stand conscious and breathe on my own, that envelope must remain sealed. What will we be doing? Francisco broke the deadly silence that had loomed over us. What will you need us to do? There are 3 other major families, the Acostas, Salvados, and the Russians. I took a long drag from the cigarette. Armando, you will reach out to the Russians. Let them know that we are about to make moves and that unfortunately some of their businesses will be affected by them. Francisco, you will do the same to the Salvados. We will not offer compensation, nor will we offer restorations. Are you sure they will accept that? Armando said, it was a fair question. We will not give them another option. We are simply giving them a courtesy, letting them know that they are not the target of our war, just collateral damage. I looked at Casper. You will begin a quiet campaign against the Acosta. For every 3 of their businesses that you strike, you will hit one from each of the remaining families, including ours. A sharp intake of air filled the room. If either one of the families warns the Acostas about our moves, we will have another piece of the puzzle. If they do not, then we will know that the old alliances remain intact. I expect that I will hear from their own heads of family once you 2 approach them. A show of solidarity. Edith has found all the missing money, I revealed. This was something that not even Francisco was aware of. Capo Bastone. Make sure that your men are prepared. All those rock drills that they have been running are still fresh in their minds. They will come in handy in the next few weeks. Gentlemen, Francisco said, we all have our tasks. Do your best. Stand by your phones in case we will need to convene again. Make no moves without discussing them with myself and Demon. These next few days will be crucial. If the feds do not back off, then our moves will have to be done with surgical precision. Armando, Casper, if you get resistance from your respective meetings, simply nod and leave. Notify me immediately. Do not make boasts or threats. There will be no need for any of that. If worst comes to worst and any of your associates become apprehended, Caesar replied, inform them that they are not to speak with anyone without me being present. The feds will have a larger amount of pull regarding detention, but even they have to allow an attorney to be present during questioning. I am to be their first call. Good luck, gentlemen, I said. May each of you have full canopies and soft landing zones. I must say that this is quite a surprise, Elvis said. Didn't think you would reach out in the middle of the greatest wave of organized crime violence in the last few years. What can I say? I replied. I just can't seem to keep away from that ugly mug of yours. What do you need, D? Elvis asked. Surely you didn't call me here just to make jokes. What's on your mind? Have you spoken to Angel? Not since you let loose that lawyer of yours, he laughed. For a brand new lawyer, he is quite a shark. You must be proud of him. He is doing a hell of a job keeping us out of Angel's cell. But before then, yes, your brother and I had a long conversation. My brother has always been a sharp tool, I replied with a chuckle, and his interests are very well directed at this point. If it was you behind bars, you know I would go through the same lengths to protect you. I stared at my friend for a long time in complete silence, watching the truth of my words sink in slowly. But that is not the reason why I asked to speak with you. There is a quiet war going on, he replied. Already, 3 families have completely collapsed. Some silent attacker is taking apart the remaining families, yours included. Of the families that are currently under attack, there is only one that is making active moves to defend themselves against the onslaught. The other 3 are quietly absorbing the damage of the attacks. Again, this includes yours. Elvis looked at me. We both know that even though I can't prove it, you are behind it. This has Baghdad written all over it. Complete guerrilla warfare. I would agree with the assessment, I mused. Whoever is behind the attacks on my family is well aware of the military doctrine. They are even using Che Guevara's strict tactics. I would start my search in the nearest Barnes & Noble agent, look for a bearded guy with tight jeans and an inability to change a tire. Elvis laughed, except for this one tiny detail. An attack on one is an attack on all. You remember telling me that? Before I could reply, Elvis continued, see, whoever is attacking your family by now would have received harsh punishment and retribution. Same with the families that had sworn allegiance to yours so many years ago. Yet here you sit, quietly. It's hard to defend ourselves while we have the might of the federal government at our doorstep, I quipped. Do you have an umbrella? Elvis asked, so that I could cover myself from all the bullshit that is raining down on me. Or maybe I will need to get a new bullshit detector, because mine seems to have been broken. For the past months, you have faced us down without hesitation, without fear. and without reservations. Every time you thought we were getting closer, you simply threw a bone for us to chase, and for the sake of our friendship, I chased it. But D, you're all out of bones, and I am tired of chasing. Yup, I replied, and that is why we are here today. My friend, I am afraid that you and I will be meeting in a battlefield, but maybe in opposite sides. I know who set this entire thing into motion. I know who has stolen money from my family. I know who tried to set my family to fall, and I know who put my brother in a position to be put behind bars. I sat up and looked into Elvis's eyes. I am ready for retribution, for complete destruction of my enemies. There will be blood, a lot of it. It's like I told you, Elvis replied. If you take the wrong side of the law, I will be there to stop you. You will try, my friend, I replied, coldness in my voice, but I am afraid that you will fail. I am afraid that you will put yourself between me and my enemies, and I will go through you to get to them without hesitation. You have nothing to be afraid of, my friend, Elvis replied, the same coldness in his voice. It is a certainty of where I will stand, in the side of the law. I will stand there against anyone, including you. And if you have to put me down or I have to put you down, then it is just another part of the life we both lead. Don't do this, Elvis, I implored. I will put you down. You'll try, he replied as he stood. And if the time comes, so will I. Capo Bastone, I said. Is everything ready? Yes, boss, Francisco replied as he made sure that the last of his men was fully equipped. Each of them wore a black suit, complemented with a black bulletproof vest that covered their chest, along with arm and leg extenders. A bulletproof helmet with night vision goggles, and an assortment of semi-automatic weapons, along with reliable sidearms, completed the outfit. Remember the layout, I replied. If anything is wrong, I will give you a call. Unless you hear from me, the operation is to begin precisely on the arranged time. Be careful, brother. You have a good woman waiting for you to return to her. Thank you, he replied, and thank you for calling me brother. I know that you have treated me as such for as long as I have known you, but this is the first time that you have said it, and I want you to know that I appreciate it. We shook hands. Make sure you take care of yourself. I think your end of this little operation is the more dangerous part of it all. If you have misread Elvis, our entire plan will fall apart at the seams. We'll be fine, I replied. Bring back all my boys. I can't believe he is so cocky that he would try to do this, Agent Presley said as he grabbed his bulletproof vest. This is not the meticulous planning that I had expected from him. Maybe his past wins have gotten to his head, Agent Davis said as he adjusted his own equipment. Absolute power corrupts absolute. Make sure that the men know that they are not to fire unless placed in a threatening position, Presley replied. We don't want to give their attorney any maneuvering room by going off script. I want this to go by the books. That shouldn't be a problem with us, Davis said. Presley knew what he meant with that statement. It was not a secret how close he and Dee had been, but Davis was unaware of the declaration of war that they had given each other. No problem on my end, Elvis replied as he pulled the charging handle of the M4. Move out. As their unmarked vehicles moved into place, Presley felt the excitement of the battlefield begin to take him. This was a feeling that he had grown addicted to. He knew it in his heart. Facing Dee, the legendary bearded demon of Fallujah, gave him a feeling in his stomach that reminded him of his first date. His lips were dry, and regardless of the times that he ran his tongue through his lips, they remained dry. He was nervous, anxious, good feelings for a man that wanted to stay alive. You doing all right? Agent Davis interrupted Presley's internal monologue. Fine, Presley replied. Is everyone in place? Yup, he replied. We are just waiting for the signal. As soon as I give it, Presley replied. We have to move fast. No sooner had he said those words that he saw the vehicles moving into place. He quietly saw Dee as he walked back and forth talking to his men. He had always done this right before a raid. Presley saw the men that were around Dee expose their weapons in order to make sure that they were fully loaded. It looks like they are getting ready, Davis said. Should we move in now? No, Presley said. We have to wait for them to move into the property. Until then, make sure that the boys are standing by. Dee continued to look at every man. Presley knew what he was doing. Dee had always done the same routine before a move. He would give a pep talk to the men, make sure that each of them were properly equipped, and assure them that their plan was the best possible one. He would always lead them into the raid himself. That was exactly what Elvis was waiting for before he would send his men in. It looks like this is gonna happen soon, Davis said. Just then, Dee gave his men the signal and they moved in unison toward the property. Go, 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 Presley replied as his own crew emerged from the vehicles. As the federal agents moved into the property, following the same path that Dee's men had taken, Presley was focused on finding D. If he could get to him first, he could try to take him in without killing him. Davis followed close behind. He was giving instructions to the rest of the men as Presley led the way into the large house. As they walked down the hallway, Presley could see bodies laid about the halls. D had done a great job training his men. 1. Move to the left. 2. Stay with us. Davis directed his men. Go. Clear. Voices repeated from behind them as they continued to move deeper and deeper into the house. The perspiration began to fog Presley's goggles. His breathing was steady. His hands were firmly grasping the weapon. His heartbeats were steady as they reached the main door. Quickly, 2 men moved with the battering ram while the rest of the squad stacked against the wall. Holding up 3 fingers, Presley gestured to the men. He lowered 1 finger as the men pulled the battering ram as far back as they could. He dropped 1 more finger as the battering ram was moved forward. He pumped his fist just as the battering ram collided with the door. Federal agents. Voices rang out in the room. On the floor. The same voices added, "Drop your weapons." The voices added as the trained squad moved into the room. Each weapon pointed at a man inside the room. Presley saw that D and another man sat in a large sofa, each with a drink in their hands. "I sat on the ground," Presley said as he pointed his weapon at D. He reached out and grabbed him by the shirt before throwing him down. Davis had done the same to the man that had been sitting with D on the couch. "Secure the weapons." "Weapons?" D asked aloud, a laugh barely contained. "Shut the hell up," Presley replied. "You screwed up, D. I told you not to cross to the other side, but you just couldn't help yourself, could you? You dumb son of a bitch." Clear. Voices rang around the room as more than a dozen men lay on the ground, hands behind their heads. "Shit," Davis said as he looked at D. "What?" Presley was now more than annoyed at the situation. His friend had crossed the line. He had used his training and joined the criminal element. Presley felt cheated until he saw the same thing that Davis had been looking at. "Is that a paintball gun?" "What the hell is going on here, Agent Presley?" D asked, a smirk etched in his face. "You just lead a group of mercenaries in a raid against this private home," Davis began. "Each of you was highly armed and equipped for a siege." As Davis reached to grab the vest that one of the men was wearing, did he realize the type of vest that it was. It was no more than a simple plastic vest designed to prevent bruising when receiving a shot from a well-aimed paintball. "Oh, shit," he added. "Want to tell me what you were doing here, D?" Presley asked as he picked him up. Quietly, he led the man outside the house. "Just what the hell was this all about?" "War games, Agent Presley," D replied. "We each take turns doing this type of thing. It is all in fun and well organized. If you would reach my attorney, he will let you know that the legal paperwork allowing us to enter the premises has been signed off by both myself and Mr. Salvato." "I could have killed you," Presley replied, using his knife to cut the zip ties that had been used to bind D's hands behind his back. "You play a dangerous game." "Nah," D smiled. "I knew that." He could not finish the statement as a bullet tore through him. Without much movement, he collapsed onto the ground. A crimson ribbon followed his path toward the ground. The smirk on his face had been replaced by a blank expression as he fell forward. "Sniper!" Presley screamed as he threw himself on top of his friend's body. D was coughing blood as he tried to move himself to his side. Presley helped him to reach a position of comfort. "Davis, get counter-sniper teams here, now." Without thinking, he moved to his friend and began to rip open the clothing in order to expose the wound. He reached into his load-bearing vest and removed a field dressing. "Elvis," D began to speak in interrupted gasps. "Reach out to Francisco." His bloody cough interrupted him. "Tell him." "They finally show themselves." Presley held on to his friend as the latter slipped into unconsciousness. Blood covered his entire upper body. Without realizing it, Presley screamed at the top of his lungs, the anguish of a man clearly defined with each syllable that departed his mouth. Without realizing it, tears rolled from his eyes as he screamed in a voice loud enough to wake the dead medic. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.